Hi, glad you made it. Looking forward to chatting with you after. Just so you know a bit about what I'm doing for a living at the moment, I'm actually producing a film series called Big Questions. I don't know if you've heard about it, but what it is, it's a documentary series that kind of goes around the world looking at the evidence for God. Because you probably know, I should ask for a show of hands, who's ever been made to feel like a bit of a dummy for believing in God? Okay. Let's just stop the bus and ask you why. Does anyone want to tell us the story that goes with that, or how someone made you feel that way? Maybe start with you guys.
I just suppose the constant doubt that people always have, like you never ever feel like you ever break through to them somehow. They just constantly just keep pushing it away.
Yeah, right. So friends and people you know. Yeah. What about you guys? No pressure if you don't want to say.
Just the way you can see the way people's they look at you differently when they realise you go to church. It's just you can see it change, and they sort of hold themselves back a bit more. They don't want to offend you, or they sort of change the way they act around you, and it makes you feel isolated a bit when they find out that you go to church and you have different beliefs to them. So
yeah, I so agree. It's even worse when they find out if you're a pastor. Suddenly start acting weird. And in a way, that's like you can't handle the real world. You Christians live in a funny little bubble, and I don't want to break your bubble in a sense. Did you want to? No, that's fine. Anyone else? How have you been made to feel stupid at times for being a Christian?
I was talking with someone who was a doctor, and he was going to great detail about amino acids and proteins and so forth, and I didn't really have too much background on that particular topic, and he just totally made fun of my belief and said, don't you know the science proves you need to do your homework and research like I have so you can become an atheist like I am? And it was fairly confronting.
I wish I had $1 for every time someone's told me a story like that, because you're dumb if you're a Christian. You're sheltered. You live in a funny little bubble as well. And that's the assumption. And I just love messing with people's heads on that one. In some ways, the best way to turn that around is you lot, right? You lot just going out there and living an ordinary, I don't mean ordinary average, I mean like just a good life in front of people, and just putting all that to bed. And as for the dumb thing, yeah, there's a lot of people publishing now, a lot of professors out of Oxford and people like that who are basically, their whole mission is to show how dumb Christianity is. And they'll go on TV and they'll say things like, of the top scientists in the world, the vast majority don't believe in God. And anyone who does is a bit dumb. And they'll find these kind of, or make up these kind of studies that seem to show that Christians are thick. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's accurate. I certainly don't want to go saying that anyone's an idiot. I'm not trying to say atheists are idiots. But my mission at the moment is to actually try to make a film series that gives some of the evidence for Christianity. And that's what we're doing. I need to confess to you, though, that you're dealing with a criminal, okay? I've just been recently arrested for that, and I need to briefly tell you that story. And if you need to go at the end of that, well, you can, because your parents would probably say, don't hang out with crims, right? But we were in India making a film about St. Thomas. You might, Doubting Thomas, you know the guy? His friends come to him after they've seen Jesus on that Sunday morning, and Thomas is not there. And his friends come and say, we've seen the Lord. And he's like, oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, right. No, he's resurrected. It's true. Oh, yeah, sure, bud. No, the women saw it, then the men saw it, and blah, 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 blah. There's evidence. Yeah, right. Unless I get to shove my fingers in his wounds, I'm not going to believe. You know that guy. So what happens then? He has a horrible week because he can't seem to believe based on other people's evidence. I mean, come on. You would have thought that you'd believe what friends you've known for 3.5 years. If you guys are friends, would you believe what she told you on something as important as that? There's a bit of a dubious look for a second there. But yeah, you would. You can usually trust your friends. Usually. Actually, not always. Just a quick story. When I was about 19, I met this really very nice girl. And a friend of mine knew her very well. And I was kind of said, mate, has she got a boyfriend? He's like, no. I was going, great. Do you know her number? Yep, here it is. I'm like, yes. So I phoned her up. How hard is this, guys? I phoned her up and said, I was wondering if you'd like to come out for dinner. And she goes, I'm getting married in 6 weeks. Like, what the? I'm so sorry. I was told that you didn't have a boyfriend. She's like, no, 6 weeks I get married. I'm like, oh, no, sorry, crash and burn, no survivors. I went back to my friend. I said, you skunk. What were you doing to me? He says, well, you asked me if she had a boyfriend. She doesn't have a boyfriend. She's got a fiancé. Thanks a lot, pal. But you can normally trust your friends on things other than that. And so Thomas's friends are saying to him, we've seen Jesus resurrected after his death. And he's going, nah. And eventually, he has a horrible week of thinking it's all rubbish and the whole Jesus story is rubbish and he's not the Messiah. And he struggles with all of that. And then on the Sunday night, he's with his friends for dinner again. They say, all right, Thomas, if you don't believe, fine, just come and have dinner with us, okay? Which is a great move. They're friendly to him, even though he's pitched faith. And then Jesus walks through the wall, great party trick, and says, listen, put your hands here, and quit doubting and start believing. And I'm not sure Thomas even does that. I'm not sure he even needed to go into the wound. Maybe it was just enough that Jesus turned up and read his mind and said, I know what you're thinking. I know what you want. You want more evidence. Okay, here I am. And Thomas falls down and goes, what? My Lord, not someone else's. And my God, not just one I heard about. And I think that's great. That's what I want for myself. That's what I want for anyone who's looking for God. But to the point, what he does then is he goes to India. And he goes via various other places, but he ends up in India and he's teaching the gospel. And there's a bunch of Jews over there in India. I didn't realize this until we went through southwest India. And there's been Jews there in India since about 1000 BC. There's synagogues there in these gorgeous waterfront parts of India that have been there for ages. And they trace their history back to 1000 BC when they went there to trade spice with Solomon. King Solomon, if you read in the book of Kings, is this awesome spice trader and he makes bucket loads of money out of trading spice. Where's the spiciest part of the world? Well, of course, it's India. And so there's Jews over there, right? And so Thomas goes, in about 2,000 years ago, around the time of just after Christ, in the 30s AD, and guess what? There's lots of Jews there. And so he goes and tells them, by the way, I found the Messiah. And he also goes to Hindus and convinces them that Jesus is the Son of God. And he starts a church. In fact, he starts 8 churches over there. So we're traveling around taking film of these churches and finding the Thomas sites and this kind of stuff. And we had a broadcast helicopter. We put it up over Cochin Harbour. Exquisite place. And my son and I are in this clunky old 1950s taxi. That's what the film's kind of showing. We're cruising around India in this old taxi. Crazy roads. You have about 4 near-death experiences a day over there. Big buses coming on in the unofficial 4th lane, right at you. And so we're flying this copter around, and we wanted to get footage of Cochin Harbour near the synagogue. And so my wife, who was assistant producing, and the 2 crew take this copter, this hexacopter, up into a deserted building overlooking the harbour, and they're flying it around and getting great footage. And then the cops arrive and arrest them. And I get this radio message, Gren, we're being arrested by the cops. They've shoved us in the back of the paddy wagon. They are not happy. They are deadly serious. They're taking us back to the station. I don't think we can talk much more. Give me that. Right. So we got back very quickly, as you can imagine, went to the cop shop. Sure enough, there's my wife and the 2 crew. And they're talking about keeping them in overnight. They're talking about all sorts of charges, kicking them out of the country, all this kind of stuff. And they're going, why? Well, because you were filming near our big naval base. And they said, you're obviously Pakistani spies. We're like, first of all, we're not Pakistani. Second of all, we're not spies, but other than that, it's a good theory. So anyway, eventually, to cut a long story short, I don't know if I want to say this on tape, but certainly a high official in the police turns up. And he goes, he takes me outside. I'm thinking, oh, this could turn out one way or the other. He says, are you a Christian? I'm like, do I really want to admit this right now? In a country where that's not always an advantage to you. I said, yeah, I am. He goes, you a minister? Like, yeah. He goes, did you talk at such and such a Christian school the other day? I went, yeah. He goes, my 2 daughters really enjoyed that. I'm like, okay. He says, you told a story about a dog, didn't you? I'm like, yeah, I did. By some bizarre coincidence, he has 2 daughters that go to a Christian school I'd taken worship for a couple of weeks earlier. He'd received calls from other people that knew us and knew we were in a bit of trouble. Anyway, so he comes there and just basically gets us out of trouble. We kind of saw the way that God works. So my mission, I'll tell you more about this as we go, is to make a series of films that you would be hopefully proud to share with your friends. And what I really want to achieve over these sessions in the morning is to look at the evidence for and against the existence of God. And ask the question, would you have to be stupid to believe in Jesus? Or would it be actually the smartest thing you could ever do? I want to look at the evidence. Please feel free to argue with me. Please feel free to tell me I'm wrong. I won't get offended. I won't hurt you in the car park, just because most of you are fitter. Let's just be frank about what you honestly think and the reasons that you hear. And then today we might play you a film at the end of all of that. So can you tell me we've got about 25 minutes to go? Thanks, man. Oh, good. No worries. So look, let's start our list. Let's just make a list up here on the board. What are the reasons you or other people do or don't believe in a God? Let's just go pluses in favour of God. Let's go some of the minuses, and then we'll get our list together up front. Then over the next few days, we'll look at some of these things in a bit more detail. And please feel free to guide this where you want it to go, okay? What are some of the reasons you do or don't believe in God? Okay, yeah, that's a big one. You brought up. And what's the counter argument to that? Yeah, right. Yeah. Is it just brainwashing? If you were brought up in Afghanistan, would you be a Muslim? India, would you be a Hindu? Doesn't make it true, does it? Just because mummy said, I mean, all respect to your mum, tell her I said hi. But that doesn't necessarily make it true. If your dad says it, it's definitely true though, right? Yeah. No. Okay, so that could just be a cultural thing. What other reasons? Okay. Which side are you going to put that on? Positive, okay. Good. No, I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear it's positive for you. Personal experience. Personal experiences. And let's be fair and say, some people would say, well, I never had that. Or, even worse, some would say over here, I've suffered. Right? So don't come to me with your story of some big loving Santa Claus up there who likes me and cares about me because I've got cancer at 15, or whatever it is. And I want to look at that one. That's the counter argument, isn't it, in a sense? Yep. But personal experience is absolutely right with you. That's a huge one. And I'll talk about that a bit more. Maybe you wanted to. What else? Or maybe you don't, that's respect. What else? What else makes people believe in a God? That's a big one. Design in nature. I've just been cutting a film last week about childbirth. My wife, loved that woman, allowed 6 cameras into the birth room when we had our last baby nearly 2 years ago. And that's a big gift when you think about it. In your most private and vulnerable moment, yeah, sure, you can bring the film crew, hun, that's no problem. She's got final cut, and that's only fair enough. You're not showing that? Okay, fine, I don't want to show that anyway. But we've got some amazing footage. I mean, seriously, I don't want to lower the birth rate in South Australia or anything, but birth is the most freaky thing I've ever seen. I mean, it really is. When you see a head sticking out of a person in places where, anyway, it's just mind-blowing. And I got to tell you, the technology of just getting a baby out, nature leaves it to the last possible minute while the baby's as big as possible but not too big to get it out. And it's just, I can only compare it to like pulling the engine out of a Mini, okay? If you'll pardon a greasy comparison. Because everyone's always said about the Mini that it's an engineer's dream and a mechanic's nightmare. Right? Beautifully designed, how they've packed everything in, it's unbelievably impressive. But if you want to change one tiny spark plug, you've got to pull the whole thing out to bits and get it. It's just so elaborate. And if you learn about the technology, and we did in the film, we talked to this top baby doctor, and she was showing us how the baby has to twist and turn and throw its head right back, and how its head compresses, and the little fontanelles allow the bone sheets to squeeze in and stuff, but the brain's fine. Unbelievable. And the baby's pumping adrenaline through the whole birth process, and then it finally pops out. It's on this big adrenaline high, like, yeah! And that's the very moment when it just connects with its mum, and it's like, it's really awake and alive, and it looks up into its mother's face, and all that is invested in the emotional bond that is formed. It's beautiful stuff. And the more you learn about it, like a sperm arrives, okay? A sperm takes 68 days to make. It's this high-tech torpedo, weapon-grade thing, right? It really is. And hundreds of millions of them get fired out, a distance from 1 metre from the testicles to the end of the penis. 1 metre, I'm not exaggerating. Most of that's interior pipes, unfortunately. But this thing just appears and goes through the immune system of the vagina, and it goes up through the fallopian tubes and stuff, and it's swimming away with that little tail. It really is a high-tech nano machine. What I didn't realise was that the woman's body actually helps the thing get up to the egg where it's meant to score a touchdown. And it does that by having these little things called cilia. Cilia, that's the word of the day, cilia. Cilia are basically little hairs, right? They're just these little hairs in the fallopian tubes, and they kind of just push the sperm along. And that sounds simple, right? Hairs. How hard are hairs? Well, they're hard for me, but how hard are they really? But they're pushing this thing along. But when you look at the design of a cilia, it's like this crazy little machine, this little nano factory. It's made of 60 other nano parts. It's engineered not in aluminium, but in protein. And it's this incredible little device for pushing them along. Now, if you think about it, just imagine a whole lot of hairs there. If they were just beating randomly, what happens to the sperm? Nothing. It just, And if they were even beating like windscreen wipers, what happens to the sperm? Well, it goes back and forward and gets really frustrated and never kind of makes it. So what they do, they actually do a Mexican wave. It's called a metachronal rhythm. And so it's almost like these little hairs. They go, okay, go, yeah, across the whole line. And somehow hundreds of millions of these tiny hairs inside the fallopian tubes know to go pop, 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 pop at just the right time, and they push the sperm along. And so those hairs are incredible. When you look at them, I mean, I could keep you here for about 3 hours, or a real expert could, telling you about these tiny little hairs, because they've got they're like a city building. They've got a foundation structure at the base, which is kind of what controls them, and it decides when they need to get longer or shorter. They've got these little lift wells, these little elevator shafts that run up the middle of them, that take gear up to the top if they need to get longer. They build more bricks on the top and kind of get longer. Or there's a special little protein, which is like a demolition crew, that comes along and goes, too long, chop those bricks off, send them down the elevator shaft, chop, 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 we need to shorten down, there's no use for us for the next few months, boom, down we go. And it's just, it's an incredible piece of technology. Now here's the question, did all of that happen over a long time period by chance? I cannot honestly believe that. I cannot honestly believe that. It is too good. And so a lot of people say when you look at nature, and that's just a hair. You should see the whole system. I did a bit of reading and a bit of interviewing of baby doctors for this film, and it just gobsmacked me, the technology involved in making you 20 years ago, right? It's staggering. And I'm a bit with the Bible writer who says, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. And the more you learn about science, the more it seems to me to just shout at you, this is genius behind this, not luck, genius. And so a lot of people would say, now of course there is a counter-argument, where people will come along and say, what? What's the counter-argument to that? Huh? Someone said? Evolution, yep. Evolution. Someone said randomness. Someone said evolution and they went, show me, that's okay. Randomness. And it's kind of like accumulated luck. I just find that so ridiculously hard to believe. Let me put it to you this way. My phone sometimes does pocket typing. Does yours? Have you ever had it go when it's sitting in your pocket? You know, an SMS? Or SIMers, as some people call it. In fact, I did it to a friend of mine the other day. It was in my pocket the whole time, and it types in this message and it goes, QWERTY. I'm like, oh, and he didn't even bother to reply because he knew it wasn't the normal amazing levels of intelligence, of course, that I would show. Why are you laughing, you rude people? In my messages, and I could show you. It's just this gobbledygook. Now, let's imagine, and please imagine, that my wife finds a message on my phone and it says, I love you. Make up a girl's name for me. Someone, huh? Let's pick an interesting one. Brunhilde. Is there anyone called Brunhilde? Okay. So let's imagine it says, I love you, Brunhilde, right? A nice German name. What are the chances? And I say to her, I didn't type that one, hun. It must have happened in my pocket. She goes, oh, really? Okay, let's do some maths, clever boy. And let's work out what are the chances of it typing the letter I? Well, there's 30 keys on the keyboard. Chances of getting I are what? 1 in 30. All right. 1 in 30. Then you need a space. Chances, 1 in 30. What are we up to now? Is it 1 in 30 plus 1 in 30? No, it's times. 1 in 30 times 1 in 30. What's that? I'm going to carry the 9. Think of the number first. What is it? 1 in 900. Okay. Then what about the L part? L. 1 in 900. What are we up to? Someone get their phone out and just do this maths for us. What's that? 27,000. That's right. 1 in 27,000. Then here, LO. 1 in 27,000 times 30, which is? Huh? Is there anyone called Susan in the room? Okay, good. We'll make it Susan because that's so much easier than Brunhilde. Yeah, exactly. 810,000. And by the time you get to the end of I love you, Susan, you know what the odds are? They're 1 in hundreds of millions. Hundreds of millions of me typing I love you, Susan out of my pocket. Why am I telling you about that? Because you're also a big collection of spelling. Your DNA. Okay? The DNA that spells you, that gives you, your grandfather's earlobes, whatever it is, and your mother's nose. Noses run in our family, unfortunately. And all that kind of stuff. Why have you got the eye colour that you've got, and where'd you get your lovely red hair from, and how have you got that clever running gift, and where did you, blah, 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 okay? Or male pattern baldness genes, to use a random example. All those things come through the, don't you laugh, all of those things come through the genes. Now, if it takes me one chance in hundreds of millions to get to I love you, Susan, you know how many letters comprise your DNA? About 3.5 B for billion. So that makes a Shakespeare play look easy. They did an experiment online where they had all these monkeys typing. Look it up, monkeys typing Shakespeare, if you just Google that. And they got these monkeys to type, to see if they could get any lines of Shakespeare. And they gave them unlimited typewriters. The monkeys doubled every couple of days, which means they were doing more than just typing, doesn't it? But anyway, the monkeys doubled. And unlimited bananas and all the paper they could use and all this stuff. And they just did this model on the internet. And it took, for those physicists who say the universe is about 13.7 billion years old, that was nowhere near enough time for these monkeys even to type a couple of words of Shakespeare, let alone Hamlet, to be or not to be. Right? You're not going to get that out of randomness. And so a Shakespeare play has about 120,000 words in it. About 120,000 letters in it. Right? You've got 3.5 B for billion in your DNA. So why would you think that would arise by randomness? So to me, that's a big one there. And I know a lot of people in science faculties will use their science against faith because they don't believe it. But if you look fairly, if you go and study anything in the scientific field, do not be afraid. Look into some of the stuff on DNA. There's a good book in the ABC I noticed last night called Evolution Impossible by a guy called John Ashton, who is a weapon-grade Adventist science professor. Fascinating bloke. Have a look at some of that evidence if you're a science head. And I think it'll start you feeling less apologetic, bad word, less embarrassed about what you believe. So that's some of that. If you're interested in science, have a chat with me afterwards. I'll throw some books at you that you might want to read. There's a guy called John Lennox as well. If you haven't come across him, John Lennox. In fact, you can get this stuff for free on the internet. Any talks or debates by him will be awesome. If you've got $15 to spend, get his book, God's Undertaker, which is a really good read in that regard. But chat to me afterwards if you want. So that's that one. Why else? Why else? Why else? Yeah. Easier to believe a lie than the truth? Okay. Which side would you put that on? The negative? Okay. I like what you said. Why is it easier to believe a lie? Great point. There is much more evidence in favour of evolution. But the question is, why is that? Exactly, because vast majority of scientists are looking for that and publishing on that. And you're right, that's, in a way, that's a political question. You try getting a PhD up in any university in Australia on some topic of design, and you won't even get the chance to look at it. You won't get a supervisor, you won't get accepted. So in a way, the system is rigged. And I'd argue that you look at a film like Expelled, and he goes through and shows how you're just not going to get a chance. In fact, if you're an academic and you're too public about your belief in science, you can very well get shot down and your career gets hammered. So yeah, it's easy to believe a lie. That's a good comment. I think one of the other reasons, why is it so popular to believe in no God? What's the emotional payoff? Why does it feel good? Okay, exactly. How can we put that? What's the attraction over here? In a sense, it's a freedom. Okay, let me be honest. In a sense, it's a kind of a freedom where I can do whatever the hell I want because there's no hell, right? Seriously. And in a way, you're not accountable. Let's put it there. You're not accountable. There's nobody up there assessing what I do. I'm free. If I want to act like a selfish so-and-so, well, because I'm not going to get busted for it. And I've got to tell you, that's emotionally attractive in a way, except that if you put it up against the real God, I do want to be emotionally accountable. I think we all are morally accountable. I've got a very dear friend who's an atheist. We went through film school together, and he still feels guilty. In moments of honesty, we've talked and we've both said to one another, sometimes we stuff up, sometimes we feel bad about what we've done. And we've talked about how we deal with that. For me as a Christian, when I make a mistake and I'm disgusted by myself, right? When I'm disappointed in something I've done or said, and I won't pretend that doesn't happen, it does. When I'm disappointed in myself, have a guess what I do. Number one, I try and go to the person and apologise if that was necessary. Number two, I go to God and I say, I'm really sorry. And I get a sense of grace. I get a sense of God going, yep, you've stuffed up. Yep, you were wrong. Yeah, it's called sin, but I'm a friend of sinners. And I died for your sin. And by the way, now that you've accepted my forgiveness, it's gone. It's flushed. It's in the deepest part of the sea. And you don't have to feel bad about it anymore. So for me, the gospel is the best guilt-relieving system that I know. Because the judge of the whole universe has said to me, yeah, that was wrong, but it's okay, you're forgiven. Great. He's told me the truth about my stupid behaviour, but at the same time he said, the cross has paid for it. Whereas my old mate, my atheist friend, he struggles with his guilt from years and years and years ago because he's got nowhere to take it. So I'd actually argue that that whole thing of I'm free, there's no God, is a bit of a false one. It's a bit of a false one. What else? What other factors should we put up?
The idea of God is scary.
Nice. Why is the idea of God scary?
Because if you do, like, if when it comes to the end, everything that you've done, if you're not, if you haven't grown up with knowing that you're forgiven, everything that you have done is placed out on the table, and you are judged on what you've done. And yeah.
Judgment. Yeah, thank you. People are scared of that whole judgment thing. And that's not stupid, is it? That's probably a good thing to be. Even some of the Bible writers talk about trembling, being freaked out by it. Because there is a very scary side to God. The fact that, as you say, all my sins will be brought up if I haven't been forgiven for them. That's freaky, and it should be. Can I add to that too, though, the idea here of hell? I cannot tell you how many atheists have told me I could never believe in a God that would burn people forever and ever and ever and ever. In fact, I used to teach a theology class at Wesley Institute, and there was a girl there with a Catholic background. She wasn't very, practicing now. But she said at the beginning of the whole thing, she said, look, I'm happy to come to your class even though I'm not a Christian, but can I just say, if you're ever going to talk about hell, could you please warn me beforehand? Because seriously, I have to go to the psychologist about that stuff. It freaks me out so much. Whenever I hear about hell, I just get panic attacks. And I'd have to go. I said, no problem. If ever the topic of hell is going to come up in a lecture, I'll just slip you a wink and you can go outside and do your thing. For her, the idea of, because she'd been told that her uncle Fred, who was a bit of a crim, like me, was burning, was down there burning, and she loved him. And after his death, she was told he was down there burning, and it just freaks her out, the whole idea of hell. And she can't get away from it. And I went to the atheist convention a few years ago, and that was the biggest thing. They just kept bashing away against hell. How can this kind God make his children suffer forever and ever and ever and ever? And I wanted to jump up and say, there's a lot of us Christians who actually don't believe that. Don't believe the Bible teaches it. I know it's traditional Christian teaching, but it's not in the Bible. And it's invented later, and it's a nasty, ugly, feral idea that God would do that. And I think that's part of what's your name again? What Catherine was saying, God is scary. Part of the reason God is so bloomin' scary to people is hell. Because it makes God worse than Hitler. In fact, they had these t-shirts that said, God is worse than Saddam Hussein. Because Saddam can only torture you while you're alive, but God can keep at you after you're dead. What a tragic thing. I think that shuts a lot of people down. What else? Any other things we ought to put on the list? Okay. The Bible. Try to write that neatly. Obviously flunked that day in primary school. The Bible. Oh, that's good. Okay. The Bible. Yep, the Bible is definitely a positive for a lot of us who love it. But I've got to be honest and say, there's also a big attack going on in the Bible right now by the new atheists. And I want to look at that one of the days that we're together, particularly the God of the Old Testament. He's a horrific character. Destroys whole... Well, look at it. So a lot of people find the Bible pretty obnoxious as well. Why do you like it? Why do you like it? Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, well said. It's a concrete guide for something you don't always get a lot of concrete proof of. Yeah, good. Why else? Why else do you like the Bible? I'm assuming you do. Yep. Yep. Big time. Yep. I'm a big fan of prophecy as well. When I was 19 and deciding whether I really wanted to be a Christian or not, It was looking at the predictions of ancient people, peering into the future and going, that and that and that and that are going to happen. And then it happens centuries later. And you just go, how'd they do that? And to me, that was a really strong evidence that there is a God who can see the future. So that's another reason I love it. But also because it knocks me around. I love that there's a book out there that reads me, that looks at me and goes, pal, you're being selfish there. You're being an idiot, quit it. I love it. I love it that it's got the guts to do that. It looks at me and says, you've got to love your neighbour, not hate them. If someone mistreats you, you've got to pray for them. I'm like, oh, dude. I love the challenge aspect of the Bible. That there's this moral book out there that just goes, here's the right way, irrespective of what your opinion may be, this is right, this is wrong, bang. I love that authority. That's a plus. How's our time? 15, done. Okay, good, we'll wrap it. I've got a 25-minute film to show you. Maybe we'll do that tomorrow instead, because I've kind of let time run away a bit, sorry. And we started a little bit late. But what we'll do, we might just park that discussion there. There's much more we can add to the board and we can flip it over and talk about. Given that somebody's mentioned this, let me just use the last 10 minutes to tell you a personal experience that for me confirms the existence of God. About 11 years ago, I had the hideous experience of feeling my car backing over the bones of my little 1-year-old son. Okay? It was the most horrendous experience ever. You're reversing and you hear this and a scream, you feel the car bounce, you go around the back and there he is dying under the back wheel of the car. Completely freaked me out. So I'm glad to be able to tell you that it was only a dream. Okay, I still had the full-blown experience of that. I saw the blood, I heard the screams, ran around the back of the car, and then I woke up. Oh, and I was just, my heart was thumping like I just run a marathon. I looked over and my lovely wife was just lying there, just calmly breathing. And the digital clock was glowing red, 3:18 a.m. And I thought, oh, it didn't really happen. Thank you, God. And I said this panic prayer. I said, I don't know what that was about. I don't know if that was just me having eating pizza at night and having a nightmare or an over-worried imagination or what it is, or if it was you. But whatever it is, please look after me and my family. And I had a few tears, I don't mind telling you. Then eventually I calmed down, rolled over, went back to sleep. Woke up the next morning a bit late, and it was Sabbath morning, and I was heading off to preach at my church. And I was kind of a bit late, just chasing that extra time. And I said to my wife, and we kind of had a deal that we only had a couple of kids then, and the deal was I would pack the kids in the car and she would get all the gear and all the prams and bottles and dingy-dingy-ding that you need, and she'd do all that side. So, okay, great. So I go and the car, the garage though was too packed full. It was packed full of books actually, because I'm a nerd, and there were books all up and down both sides, and so you had to kind of squeeze and breathe in to get into the car. And so I had to back the car out before I could put the kids in. So I get my little son, my daughter was with her mother, and I get my little son and I lock him in the back lounge room thingy, and I jump into the car and I put it into reverse, handbrake off, foot on the brake, ready to go back into thing. I'm just waiting for the garage door to come up, the controller door, it's slowly coming up, and as soon as it comes up, I'm just about to hit it and power out of there because we were a little bit late, and I just had this memory of my dream. And I'm like, whoa, this is exactly the same scene. And I'm going, yeah, but that can't be true. I've just 25 seconds ago locked him in the lounge room. He's there. I need to hurry up and stop being such an emotional idiot. But then again, what if it's true? I finally, I'm like, for the love of Pete, back into park, handbrake on, run around the back of the car. Of course he can't be there. Are you stupid? Except that he's there. He's right there under the wheel. Now, how did he get there? He'd Houdini'd his way out of the lounge room, run across the other lounge room, out into the foyer through another door. He's only just over 1 year old, right? He's opened the front, latched door. He's opened the screen door, and he's run across the really wobbly flagstoned porch, veranda thingy out the front, and he's ducked under the controller door, and he's gotten in under the back of my car, all without me seeing, because I'm checking the mirrors, I'm turning my head, I'm looking every way. And he's there. And I don't know, to this day, how on earth that happened. Neither his mother or I knew that he was capable of doing that Houdini routine in under half a minute. But he did that day. And if you say to me there's no God, I say, respect your opinion, but how on earth did that happen? Oh, maybe it was your subconscious mind. It's a possibility, but why that night? Why then? We didn't even know he could properly walk without support at that age. So how on earth? And so a few things like that happen to you. You get to a point where you just go, it's got to be true. It's actually got to be true. I could tell you a few other examples of. Now, you can call that a mini miracle. It didn't change the world. It didn't solve hunger in Africa. It didn't bring peace in the Middle East. It wasn't a big messianic world changer. I'll tell you what, it changed my life. And it changed his. And you might, the other thing you can say in response to those personal experiences is some people don't get them. That very week after he'd been, I think, miraculously kept alive, we went off to the hospital and we happened to bump into a couple of friends of ours who tragically lost a child that same week. They were praying people. Why didn't they get a miracle? I don't know. I don't know. What if he died tragically in the future? Would that take away the miracle? Well, I don't think it would. We're all going to die at some point. And just because God doesn't do everything, it doesn't prove that he doesn't do anything. And so for me, I'm kind of sitting there enjoying that miracle, thanking God for that miracle. Actually, it was really funny. I saw him there behind the car and I picked him up, strapped him into his seatbelt. I gave him a great big hug first, as if he needed it, and strapped him in, and then went and got his sister, who was, 3 or something, and put her in, and then we backed the car out. And then my wife came out with all the bottles and everything. And I said, I nearly ran him over. She's like, what? I said, I nearly ran over. And I was, blokes get like this. Some huge disaster almost happens and blokes are completely mechanical and unemotional, and it's a kind of a coping mechanism and you just plod through. Don't be emotional or anything like that. And then you get through. And I went to church, I was like that. I'm telling people about, I nearly backed over my son today, but God, it was like I was a robot. I wasn't feeling it. Then I had lunch, relaxed in the afternoon, and suddenly it hit me. I'm sitting on the lounge, I'm like, far out, I nearly killed the kid. And I'm this, Kleenex moment of tears and stuff like that, and I'm just going, and it just hit me. And I phoned up my atheist friend. I said to him, because my son's named after him, and I said, I just about killed your little namesake today, except I didn't, because I had this dream, and I kind of explained it all to him, and he's like, I won't tell you the words he exactly said. Might not bear repeating in this nice, polite company, but his basic point was, how the hell did that happen? And that was my honest question to him. If there's no God, buddy, how did that happen? And so for me, that's where kind of personal testimony comes in. If God's done something in your life that is like that, it doesn't hurt to tell the story to people and kind of mess with their heads and let them see what has happened. And I know that's a problem. We'll talk about that possibly the day after tomorrow, and the whole question of suffering. But look, we're getting our list together. We'll probably wrap it there. Thanks for your contributions and for joining in today. I'd like to look in more detail at some of those, particularly that one, because it's probably the biggest counter-argument. And there's a few others I'd like to put on the board if you don't think of them, and suggest to you. But listen, thanks for your company so far. Were there any questions or comments quickly before we wrap? It's all good? Okay, everyone's all... Is that a hand or are you just exercising? Okay, no problem. Feel free. It's not an auction. Sold to the man in the green. All right. Can I pray with you guys? God, I pray that you would reveal yourself to us. I pray that we'd be open and listen. And I pray that we'd know you all the ways possible. We'd know you intellectually, using our minds. We'd know you emotionally and personally and experientially, using our life experience. We'd see you in others. We'd be able to love other people like you do. And I pray also that as a community we'd build up each other's faith and encourage one another in love and faith and good works and all the stuff that you're planning for us. I just pray that it'd be real. I just pray that we'd go back to our own worlds and be able to talk to you. We'd be able to, as we lie on our pillows tonight, able to really get a sense of connection with this big, kind heart and mind behind the universe. and know that you love us, that you have an eternity of bliss planned for us, and that you have useful things for us to do in this life as well. I just pray that we'd find that and find you in Christ's name. Amen. Thanks a lot, team.